I want to introduce the illustrious Kate Becker from the Office of Film and Music. Round of applause, please.
Thank you very much, Kyle, and thank you all for being here. It's super exciting to do something for the first time and have this many people show up, so way to go, audience. We have a really exciting day in store for you. We had an opening speaker planned who will not be joining us. His name was Cheo Coker. His name is Cheo Coker, and he is the creator and showrunner of Luke Cage. You may know who Luke Cage is, first African-American Marvel character, pretty important. Yeah, yay for that. So Cheo lives here now and was planning to open this film career day for us. Netflix canceled his show last week. So he is in Los Angeles wrapping up that show, so he is not here with us today. But there are lots of other fabulous people here with us today, and a few people that I need to thank while I am up here. First of all, Marty Griswold and One Reel, thank you for being our producing partner. It's really been a team effort that includes many people, including Chris Swenson from the Office of Film and Music, Dan Hudson from Nifty, and a whole bunch of other people. And I should not even really name names because I am forgetting some people for sure. But we want to also thank McCaw Hall and Nesh Home Theater and Cornish Playhouse and Tuxedos and Tails for supporting this event. And most especially, we want to thank our volunteers and panelists. All these folks who are out there at Speed Networking and are here to present throughout Film Career Day are all here because they want to be here and they love the opportunity to come and talk with you. But even though Cheo's not here with us today, do not dismay. We have an amazing opening keynote for you. The guys from Prospect are here, and Prospect is this incredible film that I had the honor of being at South by Southwest for their world premiere of, and this is going to be a very, very exciting conversation. So would love to welcome Bryce Bubke, Zeke Earl, and Chris Caldwell to come out to the stage. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for having us. I'm Zeke Earl. I'm a writer, director, and cinematographer.
Chris Caldwell, writer-director.
I'm Bryce Budke, producer.
And right off the bat, we just want to play you the trailer for Prospect, which is going to come out in theaters in a week, 2 weeks here in Seattle, just so you kind of know what it is.
42 requesting release. I'm here to harvest the Queen's lair. Someone is approaching.
Well, this is something I have never seen in all my time in the green. A little girl. We're in the same trough, you and I. We'll find a way to get home if you find that buried treasure.
Even split.
Of course.
Why should I trust you?
I can offer protection. Queen's lair. Where is it? You're gonna have to trust me.
Cool. We will be begging you to go see it in theaters several times throughout this presentation. And then we also then wanted to immediately play just a short video about the making of Prospect.
One of the ambitions for Prospect was to really create this big, immersive, original sci-fi universe. While the story is relatively focused, we wanted it to be set against a backdrop that felt alive, that felt rich, interconnected, full of history, culture, economics. A lot of this inspiration goes back to the sci-fi films that we grew up on as kids, Alien, Blade Runner, the original Star Wars trilogy.
The challenge is, how do you do that on a small indie budget? Chris and I are first-time feature filmmakers. You don't get a whole lot of money for your first feature film, and we wanted it to be tactile. We wanted it to be real. We didn't want this to be a green screen movie. And all of our designs were original. Nothing was off the shelf.
The only way it seemed like we could really pull this off was to open up our own production design shop. We We ended up renting an old shipbuilding warehouse in Seattle and ended up filling it with a bunch of artists, craftsmen, designers, a lot of whom had never worked on a feature film before, a lot of whom were our friends, but they all knew how to build things and they were all creatively passionate about building this universe. So we were really starting from scratch. We had to buy all the tools, set up and install a lot of the electrical and plumbing to make this into a functioning workshop.
I need my coffee before I fix the fuse, and I can't have coffee until the fuse is fixed.
We ordered our own CNC machine, which turned out to be the key for building large sets with a really small crew, because it allowed one person to sit down and kind of plot it out digitally, and then it would be cut out into individual pieces and kind of assembled like a big Lego set.
It was almost as if we were printing the sets, and in the course of a day, you'd have a massive structure materialize.
What was so cool about the warehouse was that it was everyone working together under one roof. You had every department, people making props, guns, helmets, chocolate bars, every single detail of this world being generated in the same place. And of course, because we were doing this all for the first time, we made a lot of mistakes. Jay Duplass's character, Damon, his helmet came in too large. We put it on Jay, and it was way too big, so we actually had to saw a section right down the middle and like glue it together and resize it days before shooting.
We spent 7 months building everything for this film, and then we went straight into production.
Cast started arriving and trying on their costumes, and seeing them begin to inhabit the world we created was really exciting.
So when it came time for production, the warehouse transitioned into the soundstage where we shot all of our interiors.
The Hoh Rainforest is a place that Chris and I grew up hiking and camping, and we always thought would make this amazing backdrop for an alien world. The production crew had to be light and agile. We were in an extremely remote location and had to shoot primarily with natural light.
Our cast had to put up with a lot of unique and particularly grueling circumstances to make this movie. It's a frontier sci-fi survival story.
We were out in this forest for 3 weeks with not very many amenities. And we were asking our cast to hike for hours in these hot, uncomfortable suits, and these helmets that made it difficult to breathe.
But it was all to support the integrity of the world, to lend it a groundedness that keeps you immersed and engaged, and to forget that you're no longer interacting with reality.
This movie was a passion project for an entire community of people. There's absolutely no way we would have been able to pull this off had our crew, our friends, not been so personally invested right along with us.
It's going to be downtown at the Regal, November 8th. Please go see it. So, let's see. I'm 31. You're 31.
31.
31. This movie took the majority of our adult lives to get made. It was not a quick process. And kind of what we want to talk about today is not the making of Prospect. We're going to be talking about that to a million journalists over the course of the next couple of weeks. What we want to talk about is what no one talks about, which is kind of the really unglamorous nitty-gritty of how you get to the spot where you can even make a film like this. When I was growing up and wanting to be a filmmaker, those were the kind of the details that I always really wanted to hear.
I mean, I think if anything, just to kind of contextualize that a little bit is, another unique thing about our story is that, we chose to stay in Seattle. So we were doing this all based out of Seattle, and, we're just going to kind of plot through the specifics of what we did and try to offer some insights into kind of like retrospectively what we learned from the experience. But if anything, it's just, kind of case in point that there's no right way. I remember as we were going through this process, it was always this kind of struggle trying to figure out what is the right way. What are we supposed to be doing? And so we'll just kind of like work through.
And we're definitely going to try to leave some time for a Q&A at the end. So if we completely don't talk about what you're actually most interested in, just kind of keep your questions ready. So I wanted to be a film director when I was in high school. My freshman year, I took a class called Film Appreciation, and I took it because I thought it was going to be easy, because you would get to sit around and watch movies, and I actually learned to appreciate film. And I got the bug, and I got a cheap digital camera, and I just started doing as many things as I could. It's like I shot school sports, I shot the news, I would film, weddings for money, and I also just made a million terrible short films with my friends, and even some that were kind of like feature length. After high school, I still wanted to get into filmmaking. And I should say that despite wanting to be a film director in high school, it never really seemed possible. It always seemed really daunting. I grew up in Kaiser, Oregon. Who here has heard of Kaiser, Oregon? Exactly. There's no film industry there. I didn't, meet a living, breathing filmmaker until I was in my 20s. So I was considering film school. I chose not to go to film school, which I don't necessarily advocate. It was definitely a very personal decision. I decided I wanted to focus kind of on the entry point of filmmaking, or a filmmaking process, which is writing. So I went and got an English degree. I went and studied creative writing and literature in college. But at the same time, I gave myself a really thorough self-education. I would go to the video store, back when those still existed, next to my university, and I would pick a director, and I would watch all of their movies in chronological order. And it was so cool to see where someone starts and then see how they slowly evolve. Because it's really easy to watch a masterpiece film and wonder how do you ever get to make something like that. But when you actually watch an entire director's filmography step by step, it seems so much more possible. And then even though I wasn't going to film school, I still made a lot of films in college. I was, shot a lot of music videos. I made a film called Death of a Television, which is about a television that bleeds to death. And it was rejected by many all the film festivals I submitted to. And that goes for most of the stuff I had made up to that point. I was always making stuff on the side, submitting it, played a few small film festivals, but I had no real kind of breakout success. But I think it's good to think about filmmaking in almost a similar way to writing. You learn how to write in elementary school, and you write a lot of unimportant stuff, even just notes to your friends, papers. And I think you kind of got to think about filmmaking the same way. You just need to do it a lot so you get familiar with it, even if what you're doing isn't widely recognized or feeling like it's having a big impact. I was rejected hundreds of times up and through college. If you look at my IMDb credits, I think I have 3 directing credits, but the reality behind that is that I've made hundreds and hundreds of videos. I had a YouTube channel all through high school that fortunately doesn't have my name associated with it. I think it's still live, but it's very difficult to trace back to me now, which is probably good. And then I think the other main thing about being in college, even though I wasn't in film school, is that I got plugged into a creative community. I met both these guys in college, and at the time, neither of them were interested in filmmaking. But I met people that I could collaborate with, and you can get that community by going to college, you can get that community by going to film school, you can get that community by just hanging out at the Northwest Film Forum up in Capitol Hill. There's people that want to make, films everywhere, and it's definitely important to find them. So after I graduated, I was in a lot of debt and needed to make money, and I was desperately trying to get internships at ad agencies because I figured I kind of have these skills. I should go into marketing because then I can actually make a living. It was during the recession, and I couldn't even get my foot in the door anywhere. I interned at KEXP, which was an awesome experience, and I highly recommend. I volunteered at the Northwest Film Forum. I interned for another director, just helping him do script research, but didn't start making money, so I started picking up freelance commercial gigs, first for my university, and then doing crowdsourced commercial competitions, and started kind of developing this very small commercial portfolio, and that's when I started roping Chris in, my friend from college.
Yeah, so I was also in the English department. We both went to Seattle Pacific University, and that's where we met. And like Zeke said, I was not gunning to be a filmmaker at the time. I was more writing focused, and my guess, ambitions post-college was to possibly get into journalism or advertising. And as Zeke said, I think the recession played an interesting role in our trajectories because a lot of those entry-level positions where we might have ended up working at an ad agency just weren't there, and they were just a lot more competitive. And so what ended up happening was we partnered together. Zeke was already doing some very, very small, I think our first gigs were with Seattle Pacific, our alma mater, doing videos for atrocious
for $4 an hour,
for $500 to make a video. But this was kind of right at the time when DSLR started doing video, and this was kind of a big step in terms of being able to assemble a kit that could take you from production all the way through post for what, under $5,000 or something?
Under $2,000.
And be able for it to stand up on a professional level and be able to take actual clients. And so, yeah, we started in 2011. We founded Shep Films, which is our commercial production company. It started, very small time, largely local, and kind of just grew organically over time. The more you do work, the more you put it out there, the more work starts to come to you. And we never took out a big business loan. We never went into debt. We just kind of grew organically, and with each job we would have a little bit more money to buy that extra piece of gear, and it was just the two of us. So we were doing everything from concept all the way through post-production. We were holding our booms, and we were holding the cameras and interviewing subjects for
working out of
videos.
Coffee shops and living rooms.
Yeah, trying to hide the fact that we didn't actually have an office, meeting with clients in coffee shops.
We'll come to you.
And essentially, from the kind of inception of Shep Films, the idea for us was always that this was going to be a commercial endeavor, but always designed to support our narrative work. And so essentially what happened was we were building a production apparatus, we were acquiring gear, and we were making, not much money, but enough money to live on and enough money to invest into smaller, bits of gear. And this essentially became our substitute for film school. Granted, it was without any oversight. We were sort of left to our own devices to go figure it out ourselves, but we did get practical on-the-ground production experience. And within the first year, we made our first short film in the Pines.
Yeah, so within the Pines, was kind of the first film that we're okay, we want to get this out into the broader filmmaking community. This is the first short film we're going to take, really seriously. But, again, that's the starting point on our IMDb, but there's years and years of making stuff before then. We put a lot of strategy on getting, oh, you know what, let's play the trailer real fast so they know kind of what we're talking about. Yeah, so this is a 2-minute trailer for a 9-minute film.
Beautiful 720p.
Yeah.
And in 7D.
What's funny to me, I didn't watch that before I do this. I haven't watched it in years. It doesn't tell you anything. I have no idea what that's about. We took 2 minutes. But so In the Pines is about a girl who wants to get abducted by aliens. I mean, that's kind of the core premise, and you watch her hike up this mountain where she believes that's going to happen, and maybe does happen, maybe not. I don't know. Watch the short film; it's free online. But within the Pines, we were very strategic because we wanted it to get into a big film festival. And we did this with not very much money at all. We had saved up a couple $1,000s for making commercials. We didn't raise any money. We did it all for that low amount of money, and with the camera gear that we had now acquired from making those commercials. So it was extremely, extremely low budget. It was made with a crew of 4 people and may or may not have been filmed on federal land without permits. But we were very strategic. We kept it under 10 minutes, and I think this is one of the biggest tips you can give someone about getting in a big film festival, is that film festival programmers are getting, especially at big festivals, get some anywhere between 4,000 and 7,000 submissions, and the top 1,000 are all pretty good, and they have to narrow that down sometimes to like 30 or 60. And so, when they're choosing between 2 films, if one's, they can program 3 10-minute films in the space of 2 15-minute short films. So I really advise, if you're trying to get into a big film festival, make your film short and be very strategic about that.
Yeah, and this is something we heard directly from programmers as well, where you're forcing that decision. If your film is the length of 2 films, it has to be better than both of those films. So.
And despite having not a lot of money to make this thing, we wanted it to be very visually distinctive, and we kind of had that in mind when concepting it, so kind of came up with this idea of using macro photography of insects and making that integral to the actual story. It's like, as you're slowly figuring out that this girl is getting abducted by aliens, you're seeing this really alien feeling imagery that really kind of supports like the tone and atmosphere. And so even though it was a no-budget short film, it very visually stood out, and we were able to break through the noise, and we made it into the South by Southwest Film Festival.
There's also some strategy around just kind of the narrative structuring of it, the way that the film is shaped. It's a little experimental. There's a lot of the macro imagery, and it was also entirely voiceover driven. So you get the story when this girl's answering machine message that she leaves her mother place back. What this meant, though, was that it allowed us to have this crew of 4 to kind of sneak into the wilderness and be really lightweight, because we weren't recording any audio with our production. The entire thing is essentially montage, and then we kind of layered the voiceover.
All natural light.
And, we, thinking back to it, this was in a lot of ways trying to keep it focused, trying to create restrictions to work within, and restrictions that would help us preserve the quality, to limit the variables on this first venture together, and make it more focused and feasible.
So yeah, we got into the big film festival. Chris, what did we get out of that?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're talking about how strategic we were about all this stuff, but in a lot of ways, we also didn't know what we were doing at all. We had no ambitions beyond this short film. I think it was just, we wanted to make a short film. We wanted to do something in narrative. And we were surprised to get accepted by South by Southwest. And that was our first ever film festival experience. It was very overwhelming. And I think, surprisingly, the most significant thing that we got out of the South by Southwest experience was getting plugged into the community of filmmakers. And that sounds kind of wishy-washy, but it's kind of the fact that, like, after the South by Southwest experience, it didn't yield us any deals. We didn't get the attention of people in Hollywood. We didn't get an agent from it. What we ended up getting from it, though, was being plugged into all these other filmmakers who were our peers. And I think this is part of, we were working very much in isolation up in Seattle. This is also a side effect of not going to film school, which kind of plugs you into that filmmaking community. Yeah, it just kind of opened up the possibilities. We met people who were making shorts, we met people who were making features, and really what we left with was more focus, and we left South by Southwest gunning for the first feature film. It sort of was that stamp of approval, and we left invigorated.
So we started thinking about what we wanted our first feature film to be, and that's where we got the idea for Prospect. We decided that we wanted to make a short film to be a calling card to represent the feature film concept, and that's also when we started looping in Bryce, because again, in the Pines, we had made it with 4 people, and with Prospect, we're like, all right, this is time to kind of level up and get on a more formal crew, and we need somebody who understands logistics and money.
So I also went to SPU with Zeke and Chris. I was part of the business school. I was an econ major, and unlike them, I did get a job out of college. I was one of the few who made it successfully into the recession. I worked at a consulting
Bryce bought a car.
Big time. It was big in 2008, all right? And so, I did project management and budgets at Microsoft for a few years, and so just essentially the same thing what you're doing is producing a film. So we went in and knew we needed to raise money. We'd budget out and knew we needed kind of mid-20s, 25,000 or so. And so what we did is we got a 4-culture grant. So make sure you're checking up on all the grants locally. They're great. We live in a wonderful place that does a lot of wonderful art grants. And then we also did a Kickstarter. And the main mentality going into the Kickstarter is that we aren't owed this, we have to earn it, and we don't deserve this money, and we have to prove to everyone that we do. And then part of that is we just had to over-deliver across the board and have our own standalone content that was more than just the pitch, hey, we want to make this film, because no one wants to write about a Kickstarter, right? There's thousands of Kickstarters. So what we did is we had BTS vignettes, not too dissimilar of what we had before, just like, here's us making a helmet, isn't this great? We wrote posters. I wrote blog posts for blogs just so they would plug one of ours about the Kickstarter, which was a nice phase of life. And then part of this too is that since we had a sci-fi film, we were able to plug into that genre community, which allowed us to expand just outside of our friends and family and allowed that standalone content to be much more captivating. And the big thing we did is we released In the Pines online during the middle of the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I think just kind of like overarching, I think in retrospect, one of the things, this was the moment that Bryce became a part of our team, and he has been an integral part of our team for everything moving forward. And I think it was sort of this benchmark when we were thinking about what we did with In the Pines, our first short film. It was something that we intentionally limited to be manageable between Zeke and I. And, you know, we were producing it ourselves. We were doing everything. We were like going shopping and buying the catering and doing like all of that stuff, but it was small. And we knew that with Prospect, it was gonna be a bigger operation. And we knew that there was a financial sophistication to executing this. And I think, you know, in terms of thinking about, you know, advice or lessons learned, it was, you know, reaching outside your skill set to bring the people on early, to augment that. And that's one of the things, like with running a Kickstarter campaign. Like we knew we needed to reach outside ourselves for money. We couldn't do it ourselves. And anytime you do that, you have to be aware that you need to demonstrate why people should give you money. There is no, you know, presumption of it being owed, so that was a part of making sure that, like, bringing on an extra voice to make sure that that was all
I did think my mom gave $500 to Kickstarter, and I don't think we needed to demonstrate to her.
That's true.
That's a
But
good
the
point.
rest of it we did.
But yeah, moving on to just kind of like, this is another little bump in the story where we did the whole festival circuit within the Pines. We got into South by Southwest, and that was our first one, but we tried to screen it at as many film festivals and attend as many film festivals as possible, and nothing happened. We had a lot of cool experiences. We met a lot of cool people. We made a lot of Facebook friends. It was nice to keep tabs on all these other filmmakers and see what they were doing, but nothing happened as far as like our career advancement or anything. The moment we put In the Pines online, we got a call from a manager that wanted to represent us. His name was Scott Glassgold, and we were super sketched out by him.
He called the night that we put the film online, and was wanting us to sign a contract that night.
I remember demanding that they send me this contract because I was just afraid he was gonna.
There was just some guy from LA that was like, and oh no, the main thing was he was trying to get us to take it down because he wanted to like feed it to press and like do like a whole thing. So it's like, take your film out of line, sign this contract, and come partner with me. We were super sketched out, but we sort of felt like, what do we have to lose, and let's see how this plays out. Turns out, you know, he's probably our closest confidant in Los Angeles, and we talk to him daily now. But the significant thing was we put it online. It got more eyes on it. As soon as that happened, we made a connection in Los Angeles, and now we had an advocate working for us in Los Angeles.
And it's worth pointing out that we that it was science fiction. Like both In the Pines was lightly science fiction, and Prospect, the short film we wanted to make, and the feature film we wanted to make were also science fiction. And we really targeted those communities, that community, with both our Kickstarter and the people in the industry that, you know, we were seeking out. So our Kickstarter was successful.
Yes,
and we got to make the short film.
And it was our first big coordinated shoot for all of us, myself included. There's a lot of learning there that we took from that point forward into the next round. It allowed us to level up our commercials, so we could do bigger commercials. A few years after this, I joined Shep. We'll just addend in there, and then. But yeah, it was a big production design focus. It was a big crew for us. Even it was maybe our biggest crew until Prospect, the feature film. It was like 18, 20 people. And there was just a lot going on. And so from my end, I mean, I don't know advice-wise here, but it's just, if you're producing it, like, be on top of your details, right? There were a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of budgets, a lot of schedules, and it's what made it successful, is because there were just so many moving parts. That you have to keep track of it all. We made it, and yeah.
I mean, I think one of the differences between Prospect and In the Pines, you know, going into it, the mentality of this is going to be a calling card for a feature film. Not only creatively were we thinking about establishing, you know, the right tone, texture, world, something that we were then going to point to when we were trying to pitch the feature. We were also able to use it as kind of a testing ground for a lot of the production methods that we were trying to use. One of the, you know, part of the DNA of Prospect from the beginning, which you see evidence of with kind of that BTS video we showed, was that we wanted to do something that was rendered practically. We wanted to see how far we could push our budget in terms of building props, sets, costumes, as opposed to, CG and green screen heavy science fiction. And the short film allowed us to kind of dip our toe in the water as far as that approach goes. We learned a lot across all levels of production, down to like the nitty-gritties of like, you can speak more to this, but like...
Yeah, I mean, shooting natural light in a rainforest is a very like distinctive thing, and we were, on top of that, shooting an enclosed helmet, and those helmets are like mirrors. They reflect everything in the environment, so that includes the camera you're shooting with. So you have to figure out like where to hide, and we developed this system of black cloaks you'd have to wear, and this was stuff that was super valuable information for the feature. I mean, one thing I want to say is once you kind of get into bigger production apparatuses, is that logistics and coordination, the stuff that Bryce was helping us with, is so pivotal, because usually, when you have a 20-person crew, whether they're volunteer or paid, you are probably only getting that crew for a few days. And that time becomes so much valuable. A small mistake in coordination, you can lose 2 hours of your 8-hour shooting window, and your film is going to be that much, kind of directly worse. So it's like, well, you have time beforehand, weeks and weeks to prep for it. Make sure every single detail is taken care of, because you need to maximize every single hour you have on set.
I'd say that one thing, like we talked about how Prospect the Short was a calling card for the feature, that is both on the creative side, but also on the logistics and planning side. We shot in the same location for the short as we did the feature. We used a lot of the same, as we said, production style. It was juiced up, it was a lot bigger, but it was a chance, we'll talk about later, of not only were we telling the story, but we were also telling the story of how we're gonna get it made and make that case early on while making the short.
Cool. So because we'd already had contacts at South by Southwest, we were able to take Prospect, the new short film, back to them. Festivals really like having repeat film directors, so they happily played it, which was awesome.
Yeah. And then we had a change of strategy from In the Pines, and we put Prospect online immediately after South by Southwest. And the nice part about Kickstarter is not only did we get the money, which was crucial, we got a really good network of press, because we had done so much legwork during it to get these press outlets interested in what we were doing with these standalone vignettes, that once we had Prospect online, we just reached back out to them, and then we had this big press pump out that was huge.
That was actually a really interesting sort of unexpected benefit to running the Kickstarter campaign. In a lot of ways, like, yes, the money is great, but you're also just building a lot of contacts. Yeah. You have now a community of people who are interested in the film, and you can immediately go back out to it. And so, like we said with our previous festival tour with In the Pines, while it was all great, we didn't feel like we needed to do that again. And when things would always start happening once we got as many eyes on it as possible. So after South by Southwest with Prospect, we immediately put it online and tried to push it out there and get as many views as possible.
So we had the successful short film that allowed us to go to Hollywood. At that point, we signed an agent, we signed on a production company, we were able to get meetings with tons and tons of financiers. We went down to LA for our first time and pitched the film like 30 times in a row. It started out really, really rough. On the first day, we got into Bad Robot with J.J. Abrams' company that, does Star Wars.
Oh yeah, that was one of possibly the cringiest moments of my life. I think it was our first time pitching the movie, and we sit down with the executive, and I start launching into this plot synopsis. And at this point, we had whipped together a treatment. This is another example of perhaps being underprepared. When we released the short film online, probably what would have been best, it would have been to have a script in hand, but we didn't. We sort of let the interest take us by surprise. And so we had this moment that we had to capitalize on, but we didn't really have anything to show for it. And so we scrapped together some ideas for what the feature film of Prospect could be like, and then we went to Hollywood and started trying to pitch it. So we didn't have very much familiarity with the story, and I just remember starting into this plot synopsis and immediately realizing okay, I am committed now for the next 15 minutes, and no matter what happens, I just have to grind through this. And it was this horrible thing of you'd get to points and you'd be like, oh wait, but you were supposed to know this so that this makes sense.
finance.
They told us no in the room, and no one in Hollywood does that. Everyone in Hollywood is just like, lies to your face and is super optimistic, but they actually told us no. But by the end of that trip of 3 days of pitching, it's like we didn't have time to think about our failures, and by the third day, it was going pretty well, and we were making connections, and I know we're a little short on time, but that was in 2014. We didn't go into production on the movie until 2017, and I think it's like that 3 years is particularly what filmmakers don't really talk about, is we tried to get that film financed, and this is with being represented by WME, one of the biggest talent agencies in Hollywood, and we had a producer, Chris Weitz, who he wrote one of the Star Wars movies, he directed one of the Twilight movies. We had a huge Hollywood producer, and it still took 3 years to get the movie financed, and numerous people would be interested in financing. They would approach us, and things would break down and go south, and it was like an incredibly long, emotional grind. It was really, really hard. And the whole time we kept shooting commercials, making money, improving our skills, and also improving our plan for the movie. We rewrote that script 3 different times. We kept working with our production designer. We started amassing this huge pitch book. And Bryce kept working on the budget and our logistical plan, and it got better and better and better until finally, 3 years later, we got another financing opportunity, and by this time, we really had our plan down, and we got the green light, and we got to make the movie.
I mean, I think a lot of times, these kind of doldrums are sort of something that happens to everybody, and it can happen at any stage in sort of your progression. And it was an unexpectedly difficult thing to contend with emotionally. I mean, we were sitting here kind of poised where our entire lives hung in the balance, where, we'd be having conversations with financiers, and it was like, maybe this could go in October, maybe this could go in November, and we're sitting there thinking, like, how are we gonna make this whole movie and put it together in a matter of a few months? And then when something falls apart, they just drift away, and then you're kind of left to it. So it's a very, it's a very intense roller coaster, and, as Zeke described, I think the most productive thing was to channel all of that angst and frustration back into the material, and to keep working on the material, so that every time we went back to Hollywood, the pitch was a little bit better, the script was a little bit better, and by the end we sat down, we had this big coffee table book full of art and production design, and we got to slam it down on tables, and we had like a movie ready to go. I think in a lot of ways, this business, and I remember feeling this a lot, can feel kind of like a who you know type situation, and that gives you a feeling of kind of helplessness. It's almost like, if I don't have the connections in place to move forward. Do I need to move to LA? Do I need to start networking and going out to parties and try to meet people? We are, at least I am admittedly very bad at that. I did not want to put any sort of faith in my
hate parties.
Ability to network.
Seriously.
And I remember, always just feeling the struggle. Why can't we just let our work speak for itself? Why can't people just judge us based on that? And I think it was out of that desire that always channeled our energy into how can we, given our resources, make something that can speak for us? And I think in retrospect, every time we made a short film, something would happen. And I think if it didn't, it would be a matter of strategizing how can we do something better to make something happen. It was very much fixated on not how to connect with the right people. We were solely focused on how do we get our work out there, and how do we get as many people to see it, and will this play with a specific audience?
It is kind of a who you know business, but more important than that is what you do. And you have to make good films, good content in order to stand out. But in order to take that next step after standing out, you have to have a good plan. While they channeled all their angst into creative, I channeled all my angst into the plan for years. Because ultimately this is a business. People are investing in either you as a director, a directing duo, or a filmmaking team, and they need to know that they're going to get their money back. Ultimately, this is the most commercial art probably out there. and you need to know who your intended audience is. Do you have somewhat of an idea of how you can make this budget back with who you're trying to sell to? What is your overall budget? What is your plan? How are you going to get there? Ultimately, you're going to have a rock solid budget and a good schedule, and in order to do that, you have to know where every dollar and every hour is going. And ultimately, your plan's going to be wrong. My plan was drastically wrong. But I had the foundation to then adjust once things changed because I thought about every single detail and knew how to pivot. And really, as we were going through this, the big thing that we always kept in mind is we aren't owed this money. We aren't owed any of these deals. We aren't owed anything. We have to earn it every step of the way. And to do it, because we didn't have experience, we just overcompensated and made sure that we were buttoned up left, right, and center.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I want to say is at the beginning of when we were just starting to come up with the idea for Prospect, my wife entered a PhD program. She's just become a psychologist, and she graduated from her PhD program 2 months after Prospect premiered. So if you're wanting to get into like writing, directing, like really like, you know, like be the head of the crew, like it's kind of, you might want to think about like getting a PhD. It took that amount of time. And also like we don't have a 40-hour work week. During Prospect, I was working every single waking minute, and even today as I'm promoting the film, it's like we're easily working, 80 hours a week. Like it can really suck all of you to kind of, get established and get in there. So it's just kind of be ready for that commitment. And do we have any time for questions?
Really quick.
Okay.
Hot questions.
So if you're a starting filmmaker and you're starting to build your own little production company, look for work, what gear, equipment, software do you think is most important to invest in first?
I would, man, honestly, renting's really cheap. I would focus on getting like basic lights that augment natural light, whatever editing software you can afford, and just like I'd say.
I mean, that said, a lot of what liberated us to work on our own narrative projects through the course of doing commercial work was owning our gear. Over time, we found that renting became a lot more cost effective as we scaled up. But having the ability to just walk out your front door, shoot something, bring it back in, edit it, is incredibly empowering.
But I mean, there's DSLRs now for $700 that you can shoot national commercials on, easy.
One more question.
Who like really has a question? Like they have a question so bad. Okay.
So when you're making a short film, how do you get music rights for like a certain song? Is that, or having anything really, or just rights for anything? Is that easy or difficult?
I mean, you're not going to be able to get songs that, unless it's like a local Seattle artist, you can email, because a lot of times they'll be really cool and be like, yeah, sure. Big songs you've heard of, like, no way, like, don't even try. There's a lot of music libraries online that you can get kind of generic music for like sometimes $25, $50 for a short film. And then in our case, we partnered with musician friends, just people who are interested in scoring. If you go on the Our Filmmakers subreddit, there are a ton of people looking to score short films.
Yeah, there's always composers soliciting, trying to like I'll
just
work for
give
free.
me an opportunity. Yeah, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook, shoot me a message. I try to reply to people all the time if you didn't get to ask a question.